September 1629. Commander Pelzert returned to the remote islands, expecting 300 desperate, starving survivors, instead of the men, women, and children who had survived the wreck of the great ship Batavia. At least 110 had been brutally murdered, not by starvation, not by the unforgiving elements, but by their own people. On this desolate strip, a charismatic madman forged a kingdom of terror, turning neighbor against neighbor. This is the story of how a fight for survival became a hunt for a throne, and how one of history's most infamous shipwrecks unleashed the darkness lurking in the human heart. Our story begins not on a desolate island, but aboard one of the grandest vessels of the Dutch Golden Age. In October 1628, the flagship Batavia set sail from Amsterdam on her maiden voyage. A brand new VOC ship carrying 300 souls and a fortune in silver bound for Indonesia's spice markets. But the real trouble wasn't the treacherous sea. It was the people on board. The three most important men on the Batavia were locked in a quiet, bitter struggle for power. The commander of the voyage was Francisco Pelzert, a high-ranking merchant. Pelzert was the company man, responsible for the mission and the cargo, but he wasn't a sailor and didn't have the natural authority of a leader. The ship's captain, Arjen Jacobs, was a master mariner, but also a heavy drinker with a serious grudge against Pelzert after a public dressing down. And then there was Cornelisz. A 30-year-old under-merchant and failed apothecary, Cornelisz was fleeing the Netherlands in financial ruin and possibly escaping charges of heresy. He was intelligent, charming, and utterly without a conscience. He saw an opportunity in skipper Jacobs's resentment. Even before disaster struck, Cornelisz and Jacobs were quietly plotting a mutiny. Their plan? Seize the ship, kill anyone loyal to the company, and use the Batavia's treasure to start new lives as pirates. They just needed the right moment to strike. Fate, however, had a much darker plan in mind. For 8 long months, the Batavia sailed south, rounding Africa and pushing east across the vast Indian Ocean. In the 17th century, sailors had no accurate way to measure longitude. Choosing when to turn north toward Indonesia was a life or death gamble. Turn too late, and you'd strike the uncharted coast of a mysterious land, Australia. On the night of June 4, 1629, the lookout spotted whitewater ahead and called out a warning. Skipper Jacobs, on watch, dismissed it as moonlight on the sea and chose not to change course. It was a fatal mistake. Just before dawn, the silence broke with a sound like splintering thunder. The Batavia slammed into a coral reef in the Abrolhos, 60 kilometers off Western Australia. The impact was catastrophic. The ship's hull tore open and seawater rushed inside. In the chaos, about 40 people drowned as they tried to escape the sinking vessel. Nearly 280 survivors scrambled onto barren coral islands. They had escaped the sea, but their nightmare was only beginning. The largest group, led by Cornelisz, landed on a tiny island soon called Batavia's Graveyard. There was no food and, worst of all, no fresh water. The chain of command, already weak, now shattered completely. Commander Pelzert knew their situation was desperate. Just days after the disaster, he grabbed the ship's longboat with his men and set off on a desperate journey north to Batavia for rescue. With Commander Pelzert gone to seek rescue, Cornelisz saw his chance. He could finally bring his sea mutiny to life on land. First, he rounded up his loyal crew and grabbed all the weapons and food they could find. No longer just an under-merchant, Cornelisz declared himself ruler of this island kingdom of despair. What followed was a calculated campaign of psychological terror and mass murder. He understood that to keep control, he had to eliminate anyone who might challenge him and drastically reduce the number of mouths to feed. A master of manipulation, he rarely did the killing himself. Instead, he coerced and commanded others to do his dirty work, turning survival into a test of absolute loyalty to him. He started by sending a group of soldiers, led by a man named Weeb Haas, to a nearby island. He told them to search for water and promised to light a signal fire if he found any himself. It was a lie. Cornelisz was sending them to die, fully expecting them to perish from thirst. With the only real military threat gone, his reign of terror began. People were killed for the smallest infractions, or for no reason at all. The sick and weak were first, drowned or bludgeoned to death. Anyone suspected of holding back supplies or being disloyal was immediately eliminated. Cornelisz's followers, now bound to him by the atrocities they'd committed, carried out his orders with sickening brutality. men, women, and even children were massacred. In total, around 125 people were murdered in cold blood. A small number of women were kept alive only to be forced into sexual slavery for him and his inner circle. Beacon Island had become a slaughterhouse. But Cornelisz had made one critical, fatal miscalculation. The man he had sent away to die, Weeb Hayes, was a true leader. Against all odds, Hayes and his soldiers had found fresh water and food on their islands, mainly in the form of wallabies. For weeks, they waited for Cornelisz's promised signal. Instead, desperate, wounded survivors began arriving on makeshift rafts, bearing horrific stories of the massacres. Realizing the truth, Hayes knew they were next. Though he was just a common soldier, he took command and began preparing a defense. His crew, armed with makeshift clubs and pikes made from scrap, built a small stone fort. This simple structure is now considered the first European building ever constructed in Australia. Soon Cornelisz's forces came for them. They crossed the shallow water between the islands, confident they could crush this last pocket of resistance. But Hayes and his men fought back with the ferocity of people with nothing left to lose. They repelled the first attack, and then a second. The final, most desperate battle came in mid-September. During the fighting, Hayes's men did the unthinkable. They launched a bold counterattack and captured Hieronymus Cornelisz himself. And just as this climactic struggle was reaching its peak, an impossible sight appeared on the horizon. A sail. After 3.5 months, Commander Pelsaert had returned. Pelsaert arrived aboard the rescue ship Sardom at the most dramatic moment imaginable. Both factions, Hayes's defenders and the remaining mutineers, raced to be the first to reach the ship. Weeb Hayes got there first, frantically explaining the nightmare that had unfolded. The mutineers, their plan to seize the rescue vessel and escape completely foiled, were quickly rounded up. Justice on the islands was quick and harsh. Shocked by the brutality, Pelsaert quickly called a tribunal right there. Based on survivor testimony, Cornelisz and his chief conspirators were found guilty. On October 2, 1629, their punishment was carried out. Hieronymus Cornelisz and several of his followers had both hands cut off before being hanged on gallows built right there on the islands. The mutineers faced harsh punishments, and 2 younger conspirators were left behind on the Australian mainland, becoming the first Europeans stranded there, and their ultimate fate remains unknown. Out of the 341 people who set sail from the Netherlands on the Batavia, only 122 made it to their destination. The Batavia wreck isn't just a shipwreck. It's a haunting reminder of what happens when society's surface gets peeled away. It's a wild story that really makes you think. Archaeological work has since unearthed mass graves on the islands, the silent, skeletal proof of the horror that transpired. These discoveries remind us that nearly 400 years ago, survivors on a sun-bleached coral patch faced a terror worse than the sea. They faced the darkness in themselves. If you found this one of history's darkest moments interesting, hit that like button and subscribe for more unbelievable stories from the past. The story of the Batavia is a grim look at the fragility of civilization. It reveals how order can dissolve into chaos and how easily a charismatic leader with a twisted heart can lead ordinary people to commit evil. The ghosts of Batavia's graveyard don't just haunt a remote Australian island. They haunt our understanding of human nature itself. And they ask a timeless and terrifying question. What horrors are we all capable of when the rules are gone?